The moment the announcement hit the airwaves, the world collectively held its breath. 2 minutes ago, an official statement emerged from the heart of Westminster. The UK Parliament had decided to strip Prince Harry and Meghan Markle of their royal titles. Not just a quiet acknowledgement, not just a gentle reminder of rules and protocol, but a sweeping, unprecedented decision that sent shockwaves across palaces, media outlets, and living rooms around the globe. You might be wondering, how could it come to this? How could the youngest son of the heir apparent and his American wife suddenly be stripped of everything that once defined them as royalty? And what does this mean for the monarchy itself? Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Imagine, for a moment, the weight of history pressing down on a single decision. The halls of Parliament, centuries old, steeped in ceremony and tradition, erupted not with applause, but with tense whispers, with the kind of uncertainty that seeps into every corner of a nation. Every lawmaker understood the gravity of this vote. Every journalist knew the headlines would dominate the globe. And somewhere deep in the palace, King Charles III, the monarch whose image is now permanently intertwined with this decision, sat quietly in contemplation, aware that his approval would forever alter the royal landscape. The tension was palpable, almost cinematic, as if time itself had slowed, waiting for the inevitable ripple effect of this historic act. But before we dive into the mechanics of the vote, before we dissect the political maneuvering and the palace intrigue, let's consider the human element. Harry and Meghan, known to millions for their charm, their controversies, their modern approach to monarchy, are facing a reality no royal has confronted in generations: a public stripping of their titles, a symbolic and legal detachment from the institution that once defined their lives. To some, this is justice; to others, a scandal of the highest order. And in the middle of it all, the question that haunts every observer: what did Harry and Meghan do, or not do, that warranted such a drastic measure? And more importantly, what comes next? From the very beginning of their courtship, the story of Harry and Meghan has been one of contrasts. A prince raised under the scrutiny of the world's watchful eyes, steeped in the traditions and expectations of centuries, paired with an American actress whose charm, intellect, and modern sensibilities challenged every expectation. Together, they became symbols of change, controversy, and possibility within a system that prides itself on stability and legacy. But in their rise, there were missteps. Public spats, leaked statements, media wars. They were relentless, constant, and often unpredictable. Each incident, each controversy, became a brick in the wall that would eventually separate them from the monarchy, a wall now reinforced by the ultimate act, the removal of their titles. It is critical to understand the timing of this decision. Parliament, an institution often perceived as slow-moving and methodical, acted decisively. Why now? Perhaps it was the culmination of years of tension, the result of private investigations, or the mounting pressure from both public opinion and royal advisors. What is clear is that this was no spontaneous act. This was a carefully orchestrated decision, one that required approval from the highest levels of authority, including King Charles himself. And yet, as with all great dramas, there is more beneath the surface than meets the eye. Hidden conversations, unseen alliances, whispered threats. These are the forces that shaped this moment. Forces that very few, even among insiders, could have predicted. And the global audience is watching, riveted. Social media platforms exploded with speculation, outrage, and support. Memes were created in seconds, spreading across continents. News outlets scrambled to cover the story, each angle more dramatic than the last. Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok became virtual battlegrounds for opinions and theories. But beyond the viral reactions, there lies a deeper question. What does this mean for the royal family, for the monarchy as an institution, and for the individuals at the heart of the storm? Will this decision serve as a precedent, a warning to future generations, or will it be remembered as a moment of unnecessary cruelty in the annals of history? These are the questions that linger, the ones that keep people glued to their screens, waiting, anticipating, fearing what comes next. Consider also the personal toll. Titles, privileges, and public roles are more than ceremonial. They define a life. For Harry and Meghan, This decision is not just a headline. It is an upheaval of identity, a profound disruption of the life they have constructed together. Imagine waking up to find that the very symbols of your status, your recognition, your hard-won accomplishments, have been stripped away in a single stroke. The psychological and emotional ramifications are staggering. Anxiety, anger, disbelief, they swirl together in a storm that few outside the royal circle can truly comprehend. And for the public, witnessing this unfold, there is a complex blend of fascination and horror. How often do we see figures so prominent, so protected, experience such vulnerability? Yet, there is also intrigue, a kind of morbid curiosity. What exactly prompted this vote? Was it behavior, negligence, political pressure, or something far more clandestine? Reports hint at private communications, at behind-the-scenes negotiations, at a chessboard of relationships and allegiances that few have access to. Was King Charles acting purely from a sense of duty to the monarchy, or were there personal considerations, familial betrayals, or pressures from allies and advisors that shaped his decision? These questions are tantalizing, creating a curiosity gap that demands exploration. Every revelation peels back another layer, exposing a mixture of scandal, strategy, and raw human emotion. And it is impossible to ignore the symbolism. Removing a royal title is not merely a bureaucratic act. It is a statement, a public declaration of status, allegiance, and authority. It signals disapproval, disconnection, and redefinition. For Harry and Meghan, the symbolism is as impactful as the legal ramifications. For the monarchy, it is a demonstration of power, an assertion of continuity, and a message to the world. The institution is unyielding, and the line of tradition remains intact. Yet, symbolism cuts both ways. In attempting to assert control, the monarchy may also ignite further controversy, fan public debate, and inadvertently amplify the very scrutiny it seeks to manage. As the world reacts, one cannot help but ponder the personal dimensions. Harry, a man who has consistently navigated between duty and autonomy, now faces the consequences of a life lived in defiance of expectation. Meghan, a figure both adored and vilified, must contend with a reality where her choices, intentions, and very identity are dissected under an unforgiving lens. Together, they are navigating a storm that combines public scrutiny, legal ramifications, and familial disappointment. Their next steps, private and public, will define not just their future, but potentially the trajectory of the monarchy itself. So where do we go from here? What does this mean for the relationship between the royals and the public? How will Harry and Meghan respond, not just as individuals, but as a unit confronting an institution that has rejected them in such a visible, irreversible manner? And perhaps most importantly, what secrets, whispers, and hidden conversations led to this unprecedented moment? The answers are not simple, and they are not yet fully revealed. Every angle is steeped in complexity, every decision layered with history, emotion, and consequence. And here is the truth. The story does not end with Parliament's vote or King Charles's approval. It is merely the opening act of a drama that promises betrayal, revelation, and perhaps even redemption. For every action, there is a reaction. For every public statement, there is a private truth. And for every headline, there is a deeper, untold story waiting to be uncovered. The events of today set the stage for a cascade of revelations that will challenge assumptions, provoke debate, and alter the course of history. And as the cameras continue to roll, as tweets fly and news networks scramble, one question looms larger than all others. What comes next for Harry and Meghan? And who, if anyone, can predict the outcome? Parliament had never seen anything quite like this. The chamber, a centuries-old symbol of democracy and tradition, was tense, almost vibrating with anticipation. The decision before them was unprecedented, to strip Prince Harry and Meghan Markle of their royal titles. Even seasoned lawmakers, accustomed to heated debates and historic legislation, were caught off guard by the gravity of the moment. The question on everyone's mind was simple yet staggering. Could an institution steeped in history actually remove members of the royal family from their titles, not for crime, not for scandal alone, but for actions deemed incompatible with the values of the monarchy? The session began like any other, but the energy was palpably different. Whispers filled the chamber as MPs found their seats, papers rustled nervously, and cameras flashed as journalists captured every reaction. Some members appeared grim, understanding the weight of their decision not just politically but historically. Others fidgeted, aware that this moment would define their careers, perhaps forever. Outside, crowds had gathered, waving banners, shouting slogans, and broadcasting their opinions to the world. Social media was already ablaze with speculation, hashtags trending within minutes, debates raging across platforms. The global stage had never felt so small, yet so immediate. Inside, the debate was intense. Lawmakers presented arguments with a mixture of precision, conviction, and, in some cases, barely concealed emotion. One MP spoke of duty, tradition, and the importance of preserving the monarchy's integrity. Another cited accountability, transparency, and the necessity of aligning royal privileges with public expectations. The words were carefully chosen, each sentence measured, each argument meticulously framed for the cameras and the historical record. Yet beneath the rhetoric, there was a human story playing out, a family's legacy being weighed against the machinery of state. Minutes stretched into hours. Votes were counted, procedures observed, and protocols adhered to with painstaking care. Every hand raised, every ballot cast, carried with it the weight of centuries. And when the final tally was announced, the room erupted, not in celebration, but in stunned silence. The motion had passed. By a significant margin, Parliament had decided that Harry and Meghan would be stripped of their royal titles. The implications were immediate, profound, and far-reaching. But what did this mean in practical terms? Royal titles are more than ceremonial flourishes. They define roles, responsibilities, and access within the monarchy. They carry prestige, influence, and public recognition. Removing them is not merely symbolic. It is an act of legal and social separation. Harry and Meghan would no longer be addressed by their ducal titles. Invitations to official events would be rescinded. Privileges tied to their former roles would be revoked. For the couple, this was not just a procedural inconvenience. It was a fundamental shift in their identity and their relationship with the institution that had shaped their lives. The announcement did not sit quietly. Media outlets immediately broadcast the news, rolling footage of the chamber, reactions of lawmakers, and archival clips of the couple in happier times. Analysts dissected the vote, speculated about political motives, and debated the timing. Social media users erupted with opinions ranging from fierce support for the decision to outrage over what some called an unnecessary, punitive measure. Memes circulated within minutes, news threads went viral, and debates spilled into living rooms and offices around the world. It was the kind of story that demanded attention, provoked emotion, and polarized audiences. Even within the chamber, reactions were mixed. Some members expressed relief, believing that the monarchy's credibility had been preserved. Others were visibly shaken, understanding that this vote might set a precedent that could echo for generations. The very act of Parliament asserting authority over royal titles was itself a statement, one that blurred lines between governance and tradition, between law and legacy. King Charles's imminent approval loomed large over the entire process, adding another layer of tension. His role, though largely ceremonial in the legislative process, carried immense symbolic weight. By consenting to the decision, Charles would signal not just agreement but endorsement of a new chapter in royal history. Behind the scenes, aides and advisors worked feverishly. Palace officials scrambled to prepare statements, ensure protocols were followed, and manage the inevitable public fallout. Legal teams reviewed every angle, ensuring that the process complied with statutes, precedents, and potential challenges. Communication strategists drafted messages for social media, press releases, and interviews, knowing that every word would be scrutinized, dissected, and circulated worldwide. It was an orchestration of unprecedented complexity, each element meticulously timed to maximize clarity, control, and impact. And yet, despite the meticulous planning, human emotion remained unpredictable. Staff whispered about the shock in Harry and Meghan's private circles, about the disbelief that gripped palace aides, and about the tension in the corridors of power. Some wondered whether the couple would challenge the decision publicly, launch legal action, or retreat quietly. Others speculated about the personal conversations that had taken place, the private pleadings made to King Charles, and the emotional turmoil that inevitably accompanied such a life-altering event. For the public, these unseen dimensions added layers of fascination and suspense. Even as the vote was finalized, the ripple effects began immediately. Social media erupted with hashtags trending in multiple countries. Journalists flooded the streets outside the palace and parliament, seeking interviews, statements, and reactions. Commentators debated whether this decision represented justice, overreach, or something in between. Every outlet, every platform, sought to interpret, predict, and sensationalize the unfolding story. The coverage was relentless, a reflection not just of public interest, but of the deep-seated cultural fascination with monarchy, power, and scandal. As the day unfolded, a sense of anticipation grew. What would Harry and Meghan do next? Would they issue statements, retreat into privacy, or confront the world with defiance? Observers speculated endlessly, dissecting their past actions, analyzing previous interviews, and attempting to predict their future moves. This was not simply news. It was a narrative, a story unfolding in real time with all the elements of drama, tension, conflict, stakes, and uncertainty. And at the center of it all were two individuals whose lives had become inseparable from public consciousness, yet who were now facing a reality few could truly comprehend. Even now, the weight of history pressed upon every decision, every word, and every glance exchanged among lawmakers and palace officials. Removing royal titles is more than a procedural matter. It is a recalibration of identity, legacy, and influence. The decision would echo through the corridors of history, referenced in future debates, biographies, and analyses. It was a line drawn not in sand, but in law, tradition, and public consciousness, signaling a fundamental shift in the monarchy's approach to authority, accountability, and image. But as the global audience absorbed the news, one question lingered, casting a shadow over every headline, every analysis, and every social media post. How would the couple respond when the reality of this decision truly hit them? Would they accept it with grace, lash out in defiance, or leverage it to reshape their public narrative? And more importantly, what private conversations, hidden alliances, or unspoken pressures had led to this extraordinary moment? The story was far from over. In fact, the vote itself was merely the opening act of a drama that promised even greater revelations. Behind closed doors, conversations were being held that could reshape not just Harry and Meghan's futures, but the perception of the monarchy itself. Every decision, every reaction, and every statement would carry consequences beyond imagination. And while the public saw only the headlines, the world of whispers, negotiations, and private turmoil was just beginning to unfold. The world sees King Charles III as a figure of dignity, duty, and measured composure. But behind the stoic public face lies a complex man, grappling with centuries of expectation, the weight of a monarchy in transition, and the extraordinary personal challenge of his youngest son's rebellion. When news of Parliament's vote to strip Harry and Meghan of their royal titles reached Buckingham Palace, Charles did not react with immediate statement or public announcement. Instead, he retreated into quiet contemplation, understanding that this moment was far more than procedural. It was a crucible of history, family, and legacy. Consider for a moment the sheer magnitude of the decision he faced. On one hand, there is the institution itself, centuries of tradition, protocol, and public expectation. On the other, there is a deeply personal dimension, his son, his daughter-in-law, and the family that, for decades, has defined his life. Balancing these forces is no small task. The decision to approve Parliament's vote required not just legal consent, but moral consideration, strategic foresight, and emotional resilience. Every word he spoke, every gesture he made, would be dissected, analyzed, and immortalized. In the days leading up to the vote, Charles was reportedly engaged in a series of private consultations with senior palace advisors, legal counsel, and a small circle of trusted confidants. Meetings were held behind closed doors, away from the press and public scrutiny. Some insiders described these sessions as tense, even fractious. Arguments were made for both restraint and decisive action. Advisors cautioned him about public perception, the potential fallout with Harry and Meghan, and the broader implications for royal authority. Others emphasized duty, tradition, and the necessity of preserving the monarchy's integrity. Charles listened, weighed every argument, and carefully considered the timing and manner of his response. It is important to note that King Charles's relationship with Harry and Meghan had been strained for years. Their departure from official royal duties, their outspoken media interviews, and their increasingly independent public personas had created friction within the family. Yet, the monarch had also expressed concern for their well-being, their safety, and their reputation. This juxtaposition of personal affection and institutional responsibility created a tension that few outside the palace walls could fully comprehend. Charles was navigating a labyrinth of emotion, expectation, and historical precedent, a task that would challenge even the most seasoned leader. The king's approval of Parliament's decision was far from a simple formality. Sources suggest that he engaged in extensive discussions with key advisors about potential scenarios, anticipating public reaction, media scrutiny, and the emotional impact on his family. One palace insider described Charles as measured but visibly burdened, noting that every word he spoke seemed weighed against both history and consequence. He was acutely aware that this was not merely a moment of administrative approval. It was a defining act that would shape the monarchy's trajectory for years to come. And yet, there was also strategy at play. Charles understood that public perception is as powerful as legal authority. A hasty or poorly communicated response could be interpreted as weakness, indecision, or partiality. Conversely, a measured, authoritative statement could reinforce the monarchy's credibility, assert control, and demonstrate moral clarity. Reports indicate that the king's approach involved a delicate balance of transparency and discretion, signaling his approval while allowing the parliamentary process to maintain its primacy. Every nuance mattered: the timing of the statement, the phrasing of words, even the facial expressions captured by photographers. Amidst this political and procedural calculus, Charles faced the personal dimension of the decision. He had spent decades watching Harry grow, guiding him through public scrutiny and preparing him for the responsibilities of royalty. The thought of formally stripping his son of titles was undoubtedly painful. Those closest to the king described him as reflective, torn between paternal concern and sovereign duty. Conversations with trusted aides reportedly included long silences, moments of introspection, and even visible signs of stress. Behind the stately exterior, Charles was a father grappling with profound disappointment and the weight of irreversible decisions. Meanwhile, whispers of private communications between Charles and Harry circulated in the media. Though unverified, multiple sources hinted at conversations that were tense, emotionally charged, and filled with unspoken understanding. Some described the exchanges as attempts at reconciliation. Others suggested they were strategic, aimed at persuading the younger prince to accept the consequences without public confrontation. Whatever the truth, it is clear that Charles approached the situation with a combination of paternal care and calculated authority, understanding that every interaction carried implications far beyond the immediate moment. King Charles's role was not limited to advisory or ceremonial functions. He was also instrumental in shaping the messaging, both internally and externally. Palace communications teams reportedly worked closely with him to craft statements that balanced authority with empathy, clarity with discretion. Every word was scrutinized for tone, impact, and potential controversy. The goal was not only to confirm the legal action, but to frame it in a way that reinforced the monarchy's values, demonstrated responsibility, and mitigated public backlash. Even small details, the order of announcements, the choice of spokespersons, the timing relative to media cycles, were meticulously coordinated. Interestingly, the decision also carried historical weight. Monarchs have, in the past, faced crises involving family members and titles, but never in this exact configuration. Charles had to consider precedent, the lessons of history, and the unique modern context of a globally televised, highly scrutinized monarchy. Every step required balancing tradition with contemporary expectations, familial loyalty with institutional integrity. It was an act of governance that combined diplomacy, strategy, and moral judgment, a high-stakes scenario in which there were no simple answers. Emotional resonance also played a role. Reports suggest that Charles contemplated the psychological impact of his decision, not just on Harry and Meghan, but on the broader royal family. The announcement would be read, dissected, and discussed by millions worldwide. Public opinion could swing dramatically, social media reactions could intensify scrutiny, and the family dynamics within the palace could shift irreversibly. Understanding this, Charles is said to have approached the matter with a blend of pragmatism and empathy, aware that the repercussions would extend far beyond the immediate decision. Yet, despite all the planning, preparation, and careful consideration, some moments were entirely unpredictable. When the formal approval was finally communicated, Charles reportedly experienced a mixture of relief and apprehension. Relief that a decision had been reached, that the process had been respected, that the monarchy had demonstrated decisiveness. Apprehension, however, lingered, knowing that public and media reactions, as well as his family's private responses, would unfold in ways he could not fully control. Even the most calculated strategy could not entirely eliminate uncertainty, emotion, or surprise. And there is another layer: the whispers of dissent, speculation, and behind-the-scenes maneuvering. Trusted aides hinted at secret meetings, potential negotiations, and private assurances that had never reached the public eye. Rumors abounded about potential compromises, contingency plans, and even conversations with global advisors who weighed in on the implications for international perception. The environment was charged, filled with intrigue, and brimming with tension. A potent mixture that transformed the palace from a place of tradition to a crucible of suspense. All of these elements converged in a moment of intense scrutiny and historical significance. King Charles's approval of the title removal was not merely procedural. It was a symbolic act, a statement of authority, and an assertion of responsibility. For the monarchy, it was an opportunity to assert control, maintain relevance, and communicate values in a rapidly changing world. For Harry and Meghan, it was a turning point, a moment that challenged identity, reputation, and the future. And for the public, it was a spectacle of power, drama, and human complexity that captivated millions. As the story unfolds, one question remains: how did this decision, shaped by strategy, emotion, and historical weight, ultimately impact Harry and Meghan? How did the king's private deliberations and public approval ripple through their lives, their marriage, and their public personas? And perhaps most importantly, what revelations, secrets, or unseen forces influenced Charles in ways the world may never fully understand? The events behind closed doors at Buckingham Palace, the conversations, the deliberations, and the emotional turmoil, all of it, would soon come to light in ways that no one could predict. And what came next would redefine not only the relationship between father and son, but the very public perception of the monarchy itself. The moment the news reached Harry and Meghan, the world watched, but the reality of their response would unfold in ways that no camera could fully capture. For them, it was not just a headline. It was a seismic shift, a public declaration that their identities, roles, and status had been fundamentally altered. The stripping of their royal titles by Parliament, approved by King Charles himself, was more than symbolic. It was a personal blow, an institutional rejection, and a public spectacle rolled into one. And the way they reacted would reveal a side of their lives the public had never seen. Harry, known for his composure under pressure, reportedly froze for a moment when he first heard the news. Advisors describe a mixture of disbelief, anger, and intense concern. Every instinct he had, trained over years under media scrutiny and palace guidance, suddenly collided with raw emotion. This wasn't about protocol, it was about identity, about legacy, about everything he had known since birth being questioned, publicly dissected, and revoked. Meghan, equally shocked, reportedly reacted with a combination of incredulity and resolve. Those closest to the couple hinted at whispered exchanges, moments of frustration, and strategic discussions in real time. The world might have seen them as figures of composure, but in private, chaos reigned. One of the first responses from the couple was careful and deliberate. Advisors scrambled to draft statements, weighing tone, messaging, and impact. Every word had to walk a delicate line between defiance and respect, between anger and prudence. A misstep could provoke further backlash or damage their public image irreversibly. And yet, despite the polished public messaging, private reactions were raw, emotional, and unfiltered. Some insiders describe Meghan pacing through their residence, phone in hand, analyzing news coverage, social media reactions, and potential allies. Harry, meanwhile, reportedly engaged in a series of calls with close friends, advisors, and legal counsel, trying to navigate a storm that had become both intensely personal and publicly explosive. It is important to note that Harry and Meghan's responses were shaped not just by the immediate event, but by a lifetime of experiences, media scrutiny, family tensions, and a constant balancing act between personal freedom and public expectation. For Harry, who had grown up in the glare of the world's attention, the stripping of titles was not merely bureaucratic. It was deeply symbolic. Meghan, accustomed to navigating Hollywood, media, and public perception, understood that every reaction would be dissected, judged, and interpreted. Together, they faced a scenario where emotion and strategy collided, where instinct and calculation had to coexist, and where every decision carried weight far beyond their immediate control. Reports suggest that the couple considered multiple paths forward in the first hours after the announcement. One option was immediate public commentary, an assertive statement acknowledging the decision but emphasizing their continued commitment to public service and personal values. Another was a quieter, private approach, allowing the news to settle, observing public reaction, and formulating a long-term strategy. According to insiders, debates about which approach to take were intense, with Meghan advocating for a swift, transparent response and Harry cautioning measured patience. The tension between transparency and strategic restraint highlighted the high stakes and complex dynamics at play. The media's reaction added fuel to the fire. Within minutes of the announcement, headlines and social media posts amplified the drama. News outlets dissected every word, speculated about emotional responses, and analyzed historical context. Memes, viral commentary, and public debates spread like wildfire, shaping perception and influencing potential decisions. For Harry and Meghan, the feedback loop was immediate and overwhelming. Every movement, every public post, and even private communications risked being leaked, misinterpreted, or weaponized in the court of public opinion. The pressure was immense, and the stakes were unprecedented. Amidst this turmoil, advisors worked frantically to manage both perception and reality. Legal teams analyzed potential challenges, reviewing historical precedents and assessing implications for public duties, financial entitlements, and private rights. Communications experts crafted messaging designed to maintain dignity, reinforce values, and navigate the storm of public opinion. Palace insiders reportedly monitored every development, anticipating questions from journalists, parliamentary figures, and public commentators. Every minute was critical. Every decision had cascading effects. Emotionally, the couple reportedly experienced a roller coaster of feelings. Shock was quickly followed by anger at what they perceived as a betrayal, confusion over why the decision was made in the way it was, and concern for how it would affect their children, public perception, and personal safety. The stripping of titles was not an abstract concept. It was a declaration that they were no longer part of the institution that had defined their lives, a rejection that cut deeply on a personal and emotional level. The impact on Meghan, particularly, was noted by insiders as acute, given her journey into the royal family and her efforts to balance public duties with personal ambition. Harry, meanwhile, reportedly wrestled with the tension between defending his family and maintaining composure, a struggle made more intense by the global visibility of the moment. In the hours that followed, Harry and Meghan made several key strategic decisions. Some were visible to the public. Social media statements, interviews with trusted media outlets, and controlled messaging through advisors. Others remained private, conversations with family members, discussions with legal counsel, and planning for the long-term implications of the decision. Every action was carefully weighed against the potential impact on public perception, media narrative, and the monarchy itself. The stakes were not only personal but institutional, and the couple navigated these waters with a combination of instinct, strategy, and emotion. Interestingly, leaks began to surface almost immediately. Unverified reports suggested private conversations with close family members, urgent phone calls to advisors, and potential plans for legal or public responses. Some reports hinted at frustration and tension between Harry and Meghan, a reflection of the immense pressure and high stakes of the moment. Others suggested a united front, a determination to respond thoughtfully, strategically, and with dignity. The combination of speculation, fact, and rumor created a complex narrative that the couple would need to manage carefully, knowing that public perception could be as consequential as the legal reality of the title removal. The global reaction added another layer of intensity. Social media users, commentators, and even international media outlets speculated endlessly about how Harry and Meghan would respond. Would they go public with anger, retreat into privacy, or leverage the moment to reshape their public narrative? The anticipation created a feedback loop. Speculation generated further scrutiny, which in turn influenced potential reactions. Harry and Meghan were navigating a landscape where every move was magnified, analyzed, and potentially weaponized in the court of public opinion. And yet, despite the intense scrutiny, there was also a sense of resilience. The couple reportedly leaned on one another, discussing strategies, personal reflections, and long-term planning. They considered the impact on their children, their legacy, and their future public engagement. While the stripping of titles was a severe blow, it also presented an opportunity, a chance to redefine themselves outside the constraints of formal monarchy, to craft a narrative that was both authentic and influential. The emotional intensity of the moment cannot be overstated. For Harry and Meghan, this was not simply a loss of titles. It was a confrontation with identity, autonomy, and public perception. The decision by Parliament, coupled with King Charles's approval, forced them to navigate a landscape of unprecedented personal and public scrutiny. And as they planned their next steps, they had to contend not only with their own emotions, but with the expectations, judgments, and curiosity of a global audience. The moment Parliament's decision hit the newswire, the media erupted. It was instantaneous, global, and uncontrollable. Headlines flashed across screens. Harry and Meghan stripped of royal titles. Monarchy enforces unprecedented move. Public outrage and shock as Duke and Duchess lose status. Newsrooms scrambled to cover every angle, every reaction, and every historical precedent. Social media exploded with hashtags, tweets, posts, and memes that spread faster than any press release could. The media frenzy was not just intense, it was relentless, turning a centuries-old institution into a spectacle for the modern age. Television networks interrupted programming to broadcast live coverage. Anchors spoke with measured authority, yet their eyes betrayed the magnitude of what was unfolding. Expert panels assembled instantly, offering analysis, speculation, and predictions. Every camera shot, every live feed, every tweet became a thread in a global conversation that spanned time zones, continents, and languages. The story was no longer just about Harry and Meghan. It was about power, tradition, and the clash between private family decisions and public scrutiny. Print media, too, dove in with feverish intensity. Newspapers ran front-page stories with dramatic photographs of Harry and Meghan at previous royal events, their smiles frozen in time, juxtaposed with images of the austere Parliament chamber. Columnists debated motives, ethics, and implications. Headlines were bold, designed to grab attention, provoke emotion, and drive engagement. The narrative quickly became polarizing. Some commentators hailed the decision as necessary and just, others criticized it as cruel, excessive, or politically motivated. The media frenzy created a swirling storm that Harry and Meghan would have to navigate carefully, knowing that every misstep could be amplified 1,000-fold. Social media became the battleground for opinion and outrage. Within minutes, hashtags were trending globally, from London to New York, Sydney to Johannesburg. Twitter users speculated endlessly, creating threads analyzing potential motives, personal dynamics, and historical comparisons. Instagram influencers posted commentary and video reactions, some humorous, some sharply critical, some deeply empathetic. TikTok videos and memes circulated within hours, often mocking the situation, sometimes expressing solidarity, but always amplifying the emotional impact. The couple's public perception was now shaped not just by official statements, but by an unrelenting tidal wave of content that shaped public sentiment in real time. What made this media frenzy unique was its unprecedented scale and speed. Harry and Meghan had faced scrutiny before, but never on this level, and never with such immediate, global visibility. Every rumor, speculation, and leak was amplified, dissected, and shared. Analysts noted that the frenzy was fueled not just by the story itself, but by the human fascination with monarchy, family drama, and scandal. People were drawn to the story because it contained elements of betrayal, power, identity, and conflict, a perfect storm for attention and engagement. Insiders reported that palace communications teams were inundated. Every statement, press release, and social media post had to be coordinated with care. The timing of announcements, the choice of spokespersons, and the wording of official communications were all scrutinized to ensure clarity, manage perception, and minimize backlash. Even small errors could be magnified into major controversies. For Harry and Meghan, the media frenzy meant that their private lives were under siege, filtered through lenses that were not always fair, accurate, or empathetic. Public reaction was explosive and diverse. On one hand, there was widespread support for the monarchy's decision. Some citizens viewed the stripping of titles as an assertion of accountability, a reinforcement of tradition, and a necessary measure to preserve the institution's credibility. On the other hand, a significant portion of the public reacted with empathy for the couple, criticizing the decision as harsh, punitive, or even vindictive. This polarized reaction added intensity to the media narrative, creating endless cycles of debate, commentary, and opinion. The frenzy also revealed contradictions and ironies that captivated audiences. Harry and Meghan, once celebrated as modernizers of the monarchy, were now being criticized for behavior that some argued was progressive, while others framed it as disrespectful or disloyal. Memes highlighted past interviews where the couple spoke of independence, privacy, and personal choice, juxtaposed against the current stripping of titles. The irony was not lost on anyone. Public fascination intensified because the story contained layers of complexity, contradiction, and moral ambiguity. Even international media latched onto the story. American outlets emphasized Meghan's Hollywood background and her transatlantic marriage, framing the decision as a clash between celebrity culture and royal tradition. European media analyzed historical precedents, royal protocol, and the potential long-term effects on the monarchy. Asian news platforms highlighted public sentiment and the global fascination with the British royal family. The frenzy was universal, transcending borders, cultures, and political systems, demonstrating the extraordinary reach and influence of both the monarchy and the media in shaping modern narratives. In the midst of this, speculation about Harry and Meghan's next moves dominated coverage. Would they issue statements, engage legal counsel, retreat from public life, or launch a media campaign of their own? Reporters dissected previous interviews, public appearances, and leaked statements to predict their strategy. Analysts debated potential outcomes for the monarchy, for the couple, and for public perception. Every moment was scrutinized, every word anticipated, and every reaction dissected for hidden meaning. The frenzy created a feedback loop. Media coverage influenced public opinion, which in turn shaped further coverage, creating a cycle that was virtually impossible to break. Interestingly, some reports suggested that Harry and Meghan were aware of the media storm even before official confirmation reached them. Trusted advisors reportedly briefed them in real time, detailing social media trends, headlines, and live coverage. This gave the couple a glimpse of the magnitude of the reaction, preparing them for both public response and strategic planning. It also highlighted the immense pressure they were under, not just legally or personally, but in managing perception in an age where media moves faster than any human can keep up. The emotional impact of the frenzy cannot be overstated. For Harry and Meghan, each news clip, tweet, and article represented both a challenge and an opportunity. They had to navigate criticism, support, and speculation, all while maintaining composure, protecting their family, and planning their next moves. The media frenzy transformed what might have been a procedural or administrative development into a global spectacle, forcing the couple to engage in a high-stakes dance between strategy, emotion, and public image. Even as the frenzy unfolded, new layers of complexity emerged. Leaks, rumors, and speculative analysis began to circulate, suggesting deeper intrigue, private conversations, and palace dynamics that had never been public. Some insiders hinted at negotiations behind closed doors, attempts at damage control, and secret assurances offered to manage fallout. Others suggested that tensions between family members, advisors, and media strategists were intensifying, adding further drama to an already combustible situation. Every revelation fueled the frenzy, ensuring that the story remained in constant motion, evolving with each passing hour. And yet, amidst all the chaos, there was a sense of inevitability. The media frenzy was both a product and a reflection of public fascination, institutional power, and human drama. It captured the paradox of modern monarchy, an institution steeped in history, yet subject to instantaneous, global scrutiny. Harry and Meghan were at the center of this storm, caught between personal stakes, familial expectations, and the unrelenting gaze of the world. Every decision, every reaction, and every statement was magnified, dissected, and analyzed, ensuring that the story would continue to dominate headlines long after the initial announcement. Inside the walls of Buckingham Palace, the mood was tense, almost suffocating. The news of Parliament's decision to strip Harry and Meghan of their royal titles had reached every corner of the royal household. The cameras outside captured only a fraction of what was happening behind closed doors. Whispered conversations, hurried footsteps, and an air of anxious anticipation. For the royal family, this was not just a headline. It was a seismic event, one that forced each member to confront the intersection of duty, loyalty, and personal feelings. And the reactions were as varied and complex as the family itself. King Charles III, having given his approval, carried a mixture of resolve and private apprehension. To the public, he remained composed, a monarch fulfilling his duty. Privately, however, he wrestled with the consequences. The decision was necessary to maintain the integrity of the monarchy, yet it struck at the heart of his family. Charles understood the historic weight of what had just occurred, knowing that the removal of titles from his own son and daughter-in-law was unprecedented in modern times. He reportedly spent hours in reflection, consulting close advisors, weighing public perception against familial bonds, and considering the long-term implications for the crown. Prince William, the heir apparent, experienced his own turbulent emotions. Unlike his father, William's response was more immediate, tinged with anger, disappointment, and a sense of betrayal. He had long navigated a delicate balance with Harry, attempting to maintain fraternal loyalty while managing the scrutiny of their family and the public. But the vote to strip Harry and Meghan of titles intensified feelings that had simmered for years. Sources close to the prince describe him as frustrated not just at the situation, but at the repeated challenges Harry and Meghan had presented to family unity and public image. William reportedly engaged in private discussions with Charles, offering perspective on public perception and emphasizing the need for decisive action to protect the monarchy's reputation. Princess Anne, the family's most disciplined and outspoken member, reportedly responded with a mix of stern pragmatism and quiet dismay. Known for her dedication to duty and her no-nonsense approach, and saw the decision as an unfortunate but necessary step. Insiders suggest that she emphasized the importance of clarity, protocol, and the message that the monarchy was resilient, even in the face of internal conflict. Yet, and also reportedly expressed concern about the emotional fallout, acknowledging that the removal of titles would deeply affect family dynamics and personal relationships. Other senior members of the family, including Prince Andrew and Prince Edward, displayed a range of reactions from relief to caution. Some were reportedly relieved that the monarchy had taken a definitive stance, a move that reinforced institutional authority and clarified boundaries. Others, however, were concerned about potential public backlash, media scrutiny, and the perception of the family as divided. Advisors describe urgent meetings, discussions about messaging, and careful consideration of how each family member should respond publicly and privately. Even minor gestures, such as appearances at events or comments to staff, were calculated to maintain composure while navigating the emotional undercurrent. Amid this high-stakes environment, the private communication between family members revealed tension and complexity. Some reports suggest that Charles reached out to Harry in private, offering counsel and attempting to frame the decision as a matter of principle rather than personal judgment. William and Harry reportedly engaged in a series of tense exchanges, attempting to reconcile their shared history with the realities of the present conflict. Meanwhile, Meghan's communications with family members were characterized by a mixture of defense, explanation, and strategic planning, underscoring her awareness of both public perception and personal consequences. The reactions of extended family members further complicated the scene. Cousins, in-laws, and close associates were drawn into discussions, some offering support, others expressing frustration or disappointment. Conversations reportedly ranged from sympathetic to critical, reflecting the diverse perspectives within a family that is at once traditional, public, and deeply personal. Even aides and long-serving palace staff felt the impact, caught between loyalty to the institution and concern for individual family members. Every whispered conversation, every hurried meeting, added layers of complexity to an already intense emotional landscape. The emotional dimension cannot be overstated. Stripping Harry and Meghan of titles was more than a procedural act. It was a symbolic rupture, a declaration of boundaries, and a challenge to family cohesion. For some members, it was an act of justice, a reinforcement of principles that had been compromised. For others, it was a painful blow, a reminder of loyalty fractured and relationships strained. The emotional stakes were immense. Disappointment, anger, sadness, and concern intermingled, creating a tense atmosphere in a household accustomed to careful control and public composure. Public perception was also a critical concern for the family. Advisors reportedly emphasized the importance of presenting a united front, maintaining dignity, and managing communication to prevent further escalation. Media outlets, both domestic and international, monitored every reaction, every appearance, every statement. Social media amplified perceptions and interpretations, making every word and gesture a matter of public scrutiny. The family's challenge was not only to navigate internal dynamics, but also to anticipate and manage the global gaze that had descended upon them. The ripple effects extended beyond immediate family dynamics. Public opinion, political considerations, and international perception all played into how the royal family managed the situation. Advisors reportedly engaged in extensive discussions about messaging, appearances, and timing, ensuring that each action reinforced the monarchy's authority while acknowledging the human dimension. Every element, from public statements to private gestures, was coordinated with precision, highlighting the interplay between tradition, strategy, and emotion. Interestingly, the family's private reactions often contrasted sharply with public appearances. While formal statements emphasized duty, resilience, and continuity, insiders reported that behind closed doors, emotions ran high. Conversations between Charles and William reportedly included moments of frustration, regret, and reflection on what could have been done differently. Princess Anne is said to have offered blunt, practical advice, emphasizing the importance of clarity and precedent while acknowledging the emotional impact. Even minor family members and aides were caught up in the tension, navigating loyalties, emotions, and obligations with extraordinary care. The drama extended to the couple themselves. Harry and Meghan, aware of the family's reactions, reportedly monitored developments closely, analyzing responses and adjusting their strategy. The interplay between their decisions and the family's reactions created a complex feedback loop, one in which perception, emotion, and strategy intersected in unpredictable ways. Every step taken by the family influenced potential actions by Harry and Meghan, and vice versa, creating a dynamic environment of tension, anticipation, and calculation. And yet, despite careful planning and strategic consideration, unexpected developments arose. Rumors of private confrontations, leaked communications, and behind-the-scenes negotiations began to surface. Insiders hinted at conversations that were emotionally charged, sometimes contentious, sometimes conciliatory. These moments, though largely unseen by the public, would later play a critical role in shaping the narrative, influencing decisions, and setting the stage for further revelations. As the royal family grappled with this unprecedented situation, one truth became increasingly clear. The decision to strip Harry and Meghan of titles was more than an administrative act. It was a catalyst for emotional turbulence, strategic recalibration, and public spectacle. Each family member's reaction carried weight. Each conversation held consequences, and each gesture contributed to the unfolding drama. The interplay of emotion, duty, and strategy transformed the palace into a theater of both history and human complexity. But even as the family navigated this moment, the story was far from over. Private tensions, strategic maneuvers, and unexpected revelations were brewing, and the next chapter would unveil reactions and consequences that would shock both the public and the palace alike. The royal family's response was only the beginning, and the implications of every decision, every conversation, and every emotional outburst were only starting to surface. As news of Parliament's unprecedented decision reached the streets, the world responded with immediacy and intensity. Citizens, pundits, and curious onlookers alike flooded public forums, social media feeds, and comment sections. From London's bustling streets to small towns across the UK, conversations ignited in coffee shops, offices, and homes. For the public, this wasn't just a royal announcement. It was a shockwave, a moment that blurred the lines between national history and personal obsession. People had grown up with the royal family as a distant fixture, something permanent, almost untouchable. And yet, here it was, two high-profile members of the monarchy stripped of their titles, making headlines in real time and thrusting private family drama into the global spotlight. Public opinion divided sharply, immediately creating a sense of social tension. Some hailed the Parliament's decision as just, necessary, and long overdue. These individuals argued that Harry and Meghan's actions had breached expectations of loyalty, duty, and decorum. They believed the monarchy had to assert authority and that the symbolic stripping of titles was the only way to maintain credibility in a rapidly changing world. Among these supporters, phrases like "finally accountability" and "rules for all," not just some, became common refrains. For them, the vote reinforced the monarchy's relevance and authority, demonstrating that even royals were not above scrutiny or consequence. On the other hand, another equally vocal group saw this decision as harsh, punitive, and unnecessarily cruel. They empathized with Harry and Meghan, viewing the stripping of titles as an attack on personal identity and a continuation of public vilification. Social media platforms were filled with supportive messages, viral hashtags, and campaigns calling for understanding, compassion, and fairness. Some likened the act to bullying, while others criticized the monarchy for failing to accommodate modern perspectives, arguing that the decision reflected outdated traditions rather than reasoned judgment. Street interviews revealed a kaleidoscope of reactions, ranging from anger to empathy to confusion. In London, small crowds gathered outside Buckingham Palace, some waving Union Jack flags in support of the monarchy, others holding signs in defense of the couple. One woman, speaking passionately to a camera crew, said, "They've done nothing criminal. Why punish them like this?" Across the Thames, a man wearing a blazer adorned with royal insignia stated firmly, "The monarchy needs to protect its values." This was inevitable. The duality of response reflected a society grappling with the tension between tradition and modernity, authority and empathy. Digital platforms became virtual town squares, where the debate exploded in real time. Twitter threads ran thousands of comments long, each offering perspective, judgment, or speculation. Some users praised the monarchy for decisiveness and clarity, while others criticized what they perceived as a cruel act of punishment. Instagram Reels, TikTok videos, and YouTube commentary spread rapidly, creating a viral feedback loop that kept the story alive, amplified, and evolving. Memes emerged almost instantly, blending humor, irony, and social commentary. One viral post juxtaposed a smiling image of Harry and Meghan with headlines declaring "titles gone forever," sparking thousands of shares and reactions. Social media had transformed the public's engagement with monarchy from passive observation into active participation. Public debates went beyond social media posts and street commentary. They infiltrated classrooms, workplaces, and dinner tables. People discussed the implications not only for Harry and Meghan, but for the monarchy itself, for tradition, and for the public's role in evaluating royal conduct. Questions dominated every discussion. Should royals be held accountable in the same way as other public figures? How much weight should tradition carry in modern society? Was the stripping of titles a reflection of fairness or vindictiveness? These questions, once confined to palace advisors and legal teams, were now in the hands of the global public, debated passionately, repeatedly, and with no easy answers. Polling data captured the intense divide in opinion. Some surveys indicated that a majority of citizens supported the Parliament's decision, seeing it as a measure that reinforced integrity. Other polls revealed strong sympathy for Harry and Meghan, particularly among younger demographics and international audiences. The juxtaposition of these findings highlighted a societal schism, generational, cultural, and ideological differences that influence perception, judgment, and allegiance. The public was no longer a passive observer. It was an active participant, shaping the narrative in real time, with opinions capable of influencing future decisions and media coverage. Media coverage magnified public sentiment. News outlets reported live from street protests, digital forums, and public spaces, incorporating interviews with supporters, detractors, and those undecided. Analysts debated the potential long-term implications, discussing whether this would strengthen or weaken the monarchy, and whether it might influence future royal conduct. Headlines such as "Public Divided Over Stripping of Titles" and "Harry and Meghan, Victims or Villains" framed the debate, while editorial commentary probed deeper questions about family loyalty, duty, and accountability. The intensity of coverage reflected the public's voracious appetite for insight, opinion, and, at times, spectacle. Interestingly, the public reaction also revealed contradictions and unexpected nuances. Many who criticized Harry and Meghan for perceived transgressions also acknowledged their charitable contributions, personal initiatives, and global influence. Conversely, some who praised the monarchy's decisiveness admitted discomfort with the public nature of the decision. The complex, sometimes contradictory, reactions underscored the multifaceted nature of public opinion. How personal belief